Welcome into the HawgBeat Half Hour podcast. I am your host, Daniel Fair. I am joined, as always, by my friend, my coworker, and HawgBeat basketball analyst, Jackson Collier. And we have a special guest today. We are talking to Stephen Gillaspie from No Ceilings NBA. We're going to talk some NBA draft stuff. Hogs are off in midweek, so we figured this would be a good time to kind of take a look at the draft. And I know, obviously, it's kind of a ways away, but Stephen covers it pretty much nonstop. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and get our ad read out of the way here. This show is brought to you by Razorback. There's only one way to describe Razorback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Razorback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Razorback has released so many new items within their new licensed game day collection, from everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. Use the code HAW20 on HawgBeat.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. It's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with code HAW20. And now that we have got that out of the way, Stephen, how are you doing today, man?
Daniel, I'm doing great, dude. This is it's awesome as a an Arkansas, someone born in Arkansas, living in Georgia now because I'm in the Navy. But it's awesome to be on a show covering the Hogs, man. This is like a childhood dream come true.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today. I'm a big fan of the No Ceilings work personally.
Thank you.
I think you guys do a lot of really good work there. A lot of really good analysis, a lot of good in-depth stuff. But let's talk about that just for a couple minutes. Kind of let people know what it is you guys do. All that sort of stuff. Just give us the 60-second synopsis on No Ceilings.
Yeah, so No Ceilings, I believe we're in our 5th year now, which is crazy to say. And what we do is we believe that, scouting for NBA draft prospects never stops. We have a pretty good foothold within that little niche community of where we're always scouting basketball players. And that's not just limited to college. We scout international players. We look at the grassroots levels as well. And all we want to do is make sure that we're providing year-round coverage, whether that be at NoCeilingsNBA.com for all of our written work. We have 3 podcasts this year, which is crazy to say because we're associated with Field of 68 now with Jeff Goodman and those guys. We have the Ground Floor podcast, a collaboration with No Ceilings at Field of 68. The Locked On Sports Network now has the Locked On NBA Draft Show with No Ceilings, and Locked On is like one of the biggest podcast networks out there, and we cover the draft for them. And of course, we have our No Ceilings podcast available anywhere you get podcasts, where we've done that for years and years, and we're keeping that going. And of course, just like everybody, we have our YouTube at No Ceilings NBA on our YouTube channel, where we have like video breakdowns. We give highlights and lowlights of players and stuff like that. So anything that you would want to see from a draft prospect, just follow us on all of our social media platforms, and you will be educated more than you could realize.
Yeah, for sure. So, talking about the draft, Arkansas's got 2 kind of headliners in the freshman class: Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas. You guys recently released your NBA draft big board. Was it, I believe, version 2.0, right?
Yeah, yes, yep. We're already on 2 big boards, and we got a mock draft coming here soon too, man. We're thick.
Yeah, for sure. So you had them had Malik and Acuff at 21 and 22, and I just want to get your thoughts on them both. As potential NBA guys and guys that are in college right now, just what are your overall thoughts on the 2 freshmen Arkansas's got?
Well, it's interesting because coming into the year, of course, we take a little bit of a breather after the draft. We collect our thoughts. We tell our families we love them, and then we're right back into the grind, right? And when we were looking at the guards, a lot of us kind of had like this shared thought where we're curious to see how Coach Calipari is going to integrate and ingratiate 2 guys who look like they want to have the ball in their hands, and that's where they're kind of at their best. And we got to continue to give Coach Calipari credit because he's been doing this for years, man, where he takes all these guys who in high school are ball-dominant guards, and he puts them in these little roles where they can still continue to flash like the stuff that made them highly touted, prominent, kind of prospects, and also help get them NBA ready. And what stood out to me with Darius Acuff is that we thought coming into the season that he was going to be like this kind of prototypical New York style, Stephon Marbury style guard where he's going to look to get his own bucket. The passing was probably going to take a few months to come along. Little did we know, man, that like his playmaking and vision, he's got basketball in his DNA playing up in Michigan, and that playmaking has showed out. I think in the last 2 games that he played this past week, he averaged like 9 assists per game, which is crazy, man. He's a real floor general on top of being a dynamic scorer. I was curious to see how the shooting was going to look this year. I believe he's over 42% or something like that shooting from deep. So he's answering a lot of questions, and it's a really talented guard class this year when you're looking at guys like Malik Brown, Neo Abdalas coming out of Virginia Tech and stuff like that, different flavors of guards, and here comes A-Cup just continuing to make it competitive. And then Malik, I've been lucky enough, living in Georgia, I get to go and watch Overtime Elite pretty much whenever I want, man, and I've seen a lot of guys come through that program. Malik was one of these guys I was real curious to see how he was going to look in college, particularly in like this off-guard role, because, they're both recruited as point guard prospects. And here comes Malik, man, like playing really well off of the ball, even though he's not perceived to be this like highly intense defensive player in high school, especially in the Overtime Elite. He has given a lot of good defensive effort as well. And even though he's not the on-ball kind of force for this team, he still does get those possessions. I think Coach Calipari has done a good job of giving him those looks and showcasing that ability for the next level. And if you look at his numbers, our friends over at Synergy, they grade him out really well. I believe he's like in the 87th percentile when you look at the way that he's able to create for himself off of the bounce. So having these guys in kind of like the early 20s, it's a pretty safe range right now considering everybody else that's kind of producing at a high level. They have some, I would say, like areas of concern that you're worried about with both of them. But overall, man, it's been a lot of fun watching these guys in the early going just continue to do things that we didn't necessarily expect them to be able to do so early on.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. You talk about those areas of concern. I mean, if you just a couple of those, what would you say those areas of concern are?
Well, for A-Cuff, it starts with the size because he's listed at 6'3", and if we're honest with ourselves, these college teams, Arkansas, my beloved Hogs, they're not exempt from, maybe we're listing these guys a little bigger because we want them to be perceived to be NBA ready, right? And he's listed at 6'3". He might not be that tall, maybe like 6'2.5" in shoes, but he's going to have to deal with the small guard problems. And the one thing that I had with him coming into the season was the shooting. And we talked about just a second ago how he's over 40% shooting. He's doing okay in terms of at rim efficiency right now. I believe he's in like the 60th or something like that percentile finishing at the rim, but he's not getting there a lot. Now, what's helpful for him is that if he can continue to be efficient when he is at the basket, he's not too far off from the aforementioned, Michael Brown Jr., Kingston Flemings, a lot of these other point guard prospects. It's just that whoever can get to the rim and score is really going to be able to do themselves a lot of favor. And then with Darius, too, on the defensive end, he's going to get hunted, especially early on in his NBA career. So those are some of the things with Darius that we're kind of worried about in terms of like areas of concern. With Malik, he's long and he's tall. We want to see him get bigger. Obviously, he's only going to be able to do so much of that in one season of college. Hopefully, he might come back for another year. There's still a lot of season to be played. But as great as he is as a shooter and as creative as he can be with the ball in his hand, he is not the best at-rim finisher. One, he's not getting there a lot. He's getting there less often than Darius. But when he is getting there, he's not really converting from the rim either. Now, I will say at his size and with the effort that we're seeing on the defensive end, I do believe that he's kind of got the leg up. If we're comparing him to Darius as a draft prospect, I think that he looks better as a defender. I think that for an off-ball player, he is a good enough ball handler and a passer. I think he's a good shooter. We just got to see him kind of do the in-between game, and then we want to see him get to the basket a little bit more and finish a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. And we're talking about the NBA draft big board that you guys released. Is that, I mean, is How does that compare to like a mock draft? Are you saying that like they would be somewhere in the 21 to 22 range, so they'd be late first rounders?
Daniel, that's a fantastic question, dude. A lot of people will ask us questions regarding one being, either a big board or a mock draft, but then we'll kind of conflate the two whenever they give their take on where a player should be and why. For the big board, what's interesting about what we do at No Ceilings is we have a collection of talent. I believe somewhere between 11 to 13. If I took the time to like name everybody, I could probably get to that exact number. I just don't have it committed to memory. But we have a diverse group of talent who value things differently. And we feel that gives us a leg up comparatively to other places because that's probably going to be more indicative to like an NBA war room. Obviously at some point, majority is going to win with these rankings. And with our big board, what we want to do is essentially say, hey, these are how these talents kind of stack up comparatively to one another. Now, even across our big board, there's tiers, and something that we did on our last big board is we gave our average ranking as a part of those breakdowns. And why we wanted to do that is that we could show our audience, right, anyone who comes and consumes our content, we can show you how wide of a gap there are between like how we perceive talent. So one player, like our top two picks, might be an average ranking of less than 2, but then our third pick might have an average ranking of over 3. And why we want to show that is to say, hey, this is where the perceived talent gap is. And that's why we think Darius and Malik are pretty similar in terms of where they would stack up within a range. But what makes that different compared to like a mock draft is that we're looking at specific teams and what their needs are. We do evaluate like who's got a contract coming up, who do we think based on what we're hearing might be traded somewhere else, and then giving a hole within their roster that provides an open for a specific type of a player. So the thing that separates these two is like big board is like how we as a collective are assessing how these talents stack up compared to one another. And then our big board is us really putting our general manager caps on and saying, okay, if we're the Oklahoma City Thunder and all these draft picks that we're getting in the first round this year for a returning national, NBA title team, what in the world do you do for a team like this? So we look at how they draft, what their kind of preferences are, what we're hearing from, different front offices, things of that nature.
So I hope you're doing well, Stephen. Just to chime in here for a little bit. No Ceilings was pretty high last year on Carter Knox. I think at some point even had him as a late first round, early second round kind of guy. Obviously, he opted to come back to school. Hasn't really lived up to expectations so far this year. How have you viewed his performance this year, and how has that affected his draft stock?
Jackson, man, again, thanks for having me on, man. And I just want to say that Carter Knox has been, if I could speak for our collective, I feel like I know our team well enough to where I could give like a at-large answer here. To be honest, again, I love the Razorbacks and I love my overtime elite people that I go get to scout. He's been a frustrating evaluation because we saw what he looked like prior to reporting to Arkansas. We saw what he looked like when he was given a little bit of opportunity for the Razorbacks last year, with the kind of loss of some of the talent, notably, Boogie Flan, players like that from last season. We felt like Carter was probably going to get a little bit of a tip of the cap for being someone who is returning to the program, familiar with the system, familiar with some of the players, knows what it takes to be a competitive player in the SEC. Looking at the measurements and, again, kind of looking back at what our priors were before he reported to Arkansas, we felt pretty confident that a player of his size, his build, his feel, his versatility, we thought that he was going to be able to come in and give a little bit more of a punch within this class. Unfortunately, you guys being Razorback fans, you see it week by week. It feels like one game he's playing 6 minutes and he's not touching the ball. And then the next game he's playing, 28 minutes and he just can't miss, and he's being an impactful defender and rebounder and just like overall contributor across a box score, right? So it's been frustrating with him, especially with, the freshman that we were just talking about. But guys like Billy Richmond too, like coming in and playing a similar position, playing with more fire, just being a more disruptive defender, a transition nightmare for the other team, just being able to come in and be a heck of an offensive rebounder as well. Some of the things that we're wanting to see from Carter, it just feels like he can be a little bit too passive and let other people come in and cook, where Billy just kind of will run in and get whatever he wants and make his mark on the game. He's a little bit more assertive and a little bit more aggressive. So seeing that in relation to the aforementioned freshman prospects, he's kind of tumbling down the board a little bit. And again, it's sad because a lot of us at No Ceilings really liked him coming out of high school.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Richmond. He was actually my next question. He's
There we
playing
go.
a little bit of a bigger role this year, playing still with his hair on fire, taking and making more threes this year. Still not a great percentage, but I guess he took something like 5 total attempts last year, or maybe a few more, but not very many at all. And this year he's taking more, making around the 25, 26% from that range. What are your kind of thoughts on his prospects at being a draftable player? What has his ability to show he's taking more threes done for that, and his increased role? How has all that played into it?
Yeah, it's interesting with Billy because, again, we have him. I know a lot of us at No Ceilings kind of have him in that like early to mid second round range. And for those who watch NBA right now, that's a very similar range to what Jordan Walsh was drafted in his 1 year at Arkansas. And he's a little bit of a project guy, wasn't a very good shooter, didn't get up a lot of volume, but he was a defensive nuisance. He was a good rebounder and good passer and transition threat. And now, if you look at what he's doing with the Celtics, he looks like one of the best players on the team right now with Jason Tatum gone. So I think sometimes it's easy just to kind of look at those two players, Billy Richmond and Jordan Walsh, and look at some of the similarities that they did. Granted, Billy's a second-year player, Jordan was a 1 year player, and he was more highly regarded coming out of high school. But looking at what Billy is doing this year, the fact that he is shooting more tells you that he's putting the work in, right? So NBA teams are taking a look at that and they're noticing too. It's one thing to where you could shoot maybe 1 or 2 attempts, a game, have a 3-point rate that's, 3 or 4 attempts per 100 possessions. And if you hit 40%, teams just aren't as impressed, right? But if you look at say Yegor Dimon, what he did in BYU before he got drafted, he averaged, I want to say, close to 10 threes per 100 possessions. Didn't hit at a high clip, but you got to ask yourself, well, if he's taking that many threes, he thinks he can take them. And if the coach is still letting him play shooting that many threes, the coach has to have the belief that he can make some of these threes as well, right? So if all these people think that there's a likelihood that he's going to shoot and he's out there getting those attempts up, that's got to be a good indicator, right? So the fact that he is shooting more shows that he's putting the work in, and it's really going to give him more offensive leeway to allow the hustle plays that we see from Billy in terms of, again, being one of the best offensive rebounders in the nation. Like if you look at a rebound per possession basis, Billy isn't out there as much as some of these other players are, but once he's in, you feel his impact immediately and often.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to kind of transition to a couple other guys. I know that NBA GMs and scouts and executives, they all kind of favor the younger guys, obviously like the freshmen and the sophomores. But Arkansas's got a pair of older guys. Trevin Brazile he's had a bit of a we'll call it a roller coaster career, right? He transferred in from Missouri, looked every bit the part of a lottery pick, tore his ACL. I believe it was South Dakota State. And then, had kind of a rocky couple of years there and then came on towards the end of last season. Now he's averaging 12 and 7 this season. With a guy like him, is he one of those guys you could see hearing his name called in the draft? I mean, even though he's, kind of an older guy, kind of been around for a while.
I would say, Daniel, that if he is, it's more likely to be as a second round prospect. But I mean, if you look at what the NBA is showing now, is that it's funny. I actually had a pretty in-depth conversation with a notable, skills trainer either yesterday or the day before. My days have been kind of blurry for a couple of different reasons, but
yeah, mine too.
I was talking with this skills trainer, and it's funny because I was like, I think the NBA with the first and second apron stuff, they need players whenever they're drafting them, especially on these like cost friendly contracts. They need them to hit more immediately. So I think that you're going to kind of see a trend of these prospects that are considered more projects as opposed to being able to produce a little bit more immediately. I think you're going to see, those Usman Jangs from the Oklahoma City Thunder, teams that are deep and are competing and they already have their rosters kind of filled out, they have an opportunity to swing on these, kind of projecty players. But some of these teams that are looking to kind of come out of the doldrums and play, and GMs that are wanting to kind of save their jobs, and these coaches that are wanting to save their jobs and continue to do what they're doing in the NBA, they need to get guys who can produce and guys who they can trust a little bit more quickly. And that's where a guy like Trevon Brazile can come in and help a team win on the margins. If he's drafted in the second round, if he's a priority undrafted free agent, or I don't think that he'll not be signed enough to be on an Exhibit 10 deal, but let's just say, for example, he's going to be able to prove himself because he is defensively versatile, even though he's had, it feels like, every sort of leg injury humanly possible. He's still pretty athletic and is able to finish at the rim. He's a good lob threat, but he can also space the floor reliably as well. So I think that all of those things kind of put in a package together. And Trevon Brazile, teams are going to take a chance on him because it's just hard to find guys who can move the way he does at the size that he is. I think I saw J. Kyle Mann from The Ringer tweet out the other day that it just feels like he is a Miami Heat player waiting to happen, and he's just going to be a nightmare in that free-flowing offense. And with the defensive prowess that he has, he can just come in and make an impact. So as an Arkansas fan myself, I wouldn't necessarily worry about if he's drafted or if he's a two-way contract. I would be more excited to see, okay, how is he going to be a bargain player for a competitive team, and then just watch how he's able to contribute to that team, even though he wasn't drafted as high as what he was probably once projected to be.
Yeah, for sure. He's one of those. He's kind of a unicorn, and he's just kind of had an up and down career. But it's he's playing the best ball of his life right now, and he's done it more consistently now than he has pretty much, except prior to his ACL injury, which was pretty early into that first season at Arkansas. The other guy I wanted to talk to you about was DJ Wagner. He had a lot of hype coming out of high school, and then I don't want to say not fell on his face because he didn't do that, but he has not lived up to that number one overall player in the draft, and now I feel like he's kind of behind. Like he's behind Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas just in terms of like scoring options, right? But I still feel like he provides that veteran experience. Do you feel like maybe he might just be one of those guys that's just like better as a college basketball player than he is as an NBA player, or is it something that he can find a good system that he meshes well with and thrive at the next level?
That's a good question. And to be honest with you, like if I was to critique myself as a scout, I would tell you that like the hardest thing, in my opinion, to kind of tell the difference between players before they go to the NBA is like, what's the difference between an NBA point guard and a really, really good collegiate point guard? I think that line is almost transparent. Like it's there, but you can see through it, right? And I think that's kind of where DJ Wagner might be. Again, was once, to your point, Daniel, highly thought of, highly recruited, things like that. But you play on these teams that are deep at your position. You kind of in and out of the rotation for, injuries, things like that. The game can almost kind of like look over you to some point. And what I will give DJ credit for is that he hasn't ran from the grind. He's very much so willing to be a cog in the machine for this Razorback program. It feels like he gives them a steady presence when the game feels a little bit too quick for the young players. It feels like coach is like, okay, DJ, get the ball, bring us home, man. Like just settle the team down. And DJ answers that call, it seems like, every time that it's asked of him. So to your point and to your question, Daniel, if I'm being honest, I don't think that we should expect him to be drafted. However, I don't think that it's unrealistic for him to find his way into the NBA, because right now, again, the skills trainer I was talking to, the thing that he mentioned to me about guards is that NBA teams are constantly telling him when it comes to like his players that he reps and that he gets ready, whether they're NBA talent already or preparing to be in the NBA. He says the two questions that are always asked are, can you pressure the ball full court right now? As we've seen, that's one of the more prominent trends within the NBA. And can you be trusted to handle the ball against pressure? And I think that DJ Wagner can definitely handle the ball against pressure. And I think that over time in college, he's been able to show that he can play that like tough, hard-nosed, gritty, upperclassman level of defense. It's just that he's going to need to be more consistent as a ball mover and as a floor spacer. If he could continue to do that, you can see him have a career path like a Colin Gillespie or a Trey Jones or whoever. Like, pick your underrated, like not as highly regarded, successful point guard in the NBA. It's not crazy to think that DJ Wagner couldn't have a career path along those lines.
Yeah, I'd throw Fred VanVleet in there prior to his come up. Just as a Wichita State alum myself, I'll throw that out there.
There we go.
I've got one more for you. I know you guys have got your big board. You said your mock draft is coming out. I'm going to give you just a quick fire. If you had to put, we'll just say Acuff and Thomas, where would they go right now?
If I had to pick, I would say that Acuff is probably in that mid-teens to early 20s range. Based on kind of like the very early conversations, there's still plenty of time for this to change. There's a lot of feeling that like it's not crazy to think that Malik could be like a returner in college right now. I'll say myself personally, I value him higher than that. And sometimes it just takes a little bit more time throughout a season for everybody else to kind of catch up. You know, I was in on Elijah Martin last year, like is an NBA talent, like very, very early. And we saw that he was like a mid-second round pick. Obviously, I think if Malik goes in the draft, he is going to have to be promised to be like in that top 22 range. But again, the depth of the guards in this class is making it so hard to kind of sift out and figure out like, okay, for a freshman player to stay in, they have to be in like that top 22 range is what history is telling us. Malik's got to kind of like bring along his consistency and answer that inside scoring ability to be promised in that range. But if a water gun to my head, I would say, Darius Acuff somewhere in that like mid-teens to like early 20s, and I think Malik has an opportunity to be like a standout sophomore returner next year.
All right, you heard it here first, guys. Malik Thomas is coming back to Arkansas next year.
Woo pig.
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate you taking some time to hang out with us today, man. We'll remind us again where we can find you on social media, and we'll get you out of here for the night.
Yeah, man. And again, thank you guys, Jackson and Daniel, so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and show my fandom a little bit. But if you want to follow a little old me, I'm best available to be found on X or Twitter or whatever you kids are calling it nowadays, at Stephen G Hoops. That's Stephen with a PH, the letter G, and then Hoops. But please, if you're going to follow me, please follow everything that we're doing at NoCeilingsNBA.com, No Ceilings TV on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel, and the No Ceilings NBA podcast, the Ground Floor collaboration with No Ceilings and Field of 68, and the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings. And we are starting to make appearances on NBA TV, like covering some of the NBA's young players. So big year for us, man. And I appreciate y'all's support and the rest of the fan support as well.
Awesome. Hey, we appreciate you. Appreciate you hanging out with us for a bit, and we'll talk again here as the draft gets closer.
Yes, sir.
All right, that is going to do it for this week's edition of the HawgBeat Half Hour. Subscribe to HawgBeat.com for $1 and get access to all of our incredible content. And we will see you guys next time.